Welcome to Virtually Amazing, the podcast for virtual assistants, with me, Shelley Fishel of Tomorrow's VA, and Joe Brianti of JLB Business Consulting. Each week, we chat with amazing guest experts, all aimed at helping you grow your VA business. So sit back, grab a cuppa, and tune in for a fun-filled episode. Welcome, listeners, to this episode of Virtually Amazing, the podcast for virtual assistants. And this is going to be episode number 53. And when you listen to this, it will be May the 24th, but we are recording it on the 6th of April. Now, April is apparently, I'm informed, Stress Awareness Month. And yes. We have a great guest coming up a bit later, Andrea Newton, who knows all about that and wants to talk about that. So we're going to be talking to Andrea a little bit later. So this is going to be coming a little bit after Stress Awareness Month, but I think stress awareness is useful at any time, don't you, Joe?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's amazing how stressful things can get at times as business owners, whether it's juggling it with the family. We've all been through a very stressful period with the pandemic and the myriad of other just minor business issues that crop up that can create stress. Yeah. What do you do, Shelley, to kind of dissipate stress as and when it kind of comes into your life?
That's a really good question. I don't really know. I haven't really thought about quantifying or breaking
jigsaws?
Down. Yeah, I do jigsaws. And I read, I think. For me, escaping into a book, a make-believe world where usually there's some sort of a happy ending, hopefully, or they catch. I read a lot of crime thrillers. Yeah. They always catch the baddie. That always satisfies my sense of justice.
Yeah,
that they get caught. In fact, we've watched a couple of series recently on the TV. We started watching a series called Your Honor, which I'd seen somebody on social media recommend. And David and we watched the first episode, and both of us decided that we didn't want to watch anymore. Mainly because we didn't agree with the premise, because it looked like the baddies, well, they weren't really baddies, but they were going to get away with it. Yeah. I don't know if they did, because we only watched that. They may not have got away with it in the end. I don't know. Yeah. But the point is, it looked like that's how it was going to develop, and neither of us felt comfortable in that. It's a really interesting point, though.
Yeah.
We watched another series which was excellent, but I was disappointed in the ending, and that was Bloodlands. I don't know if you've watched that. It's a BBC series. No, I would recommend it. It's about the Troubles in Ireland.
Right. Okay.
And about bent coppers, and it was really interesting. So I won't say why I was disappointed in case you do watch it, but I think you'll understand, bearing in mind what I said before, why I was, if you do watch it, why I was disappointed in the ending.
Thinking of bent coppers, Line of Duty.
Yeah, brilliant.
Please tell me you watch Line of Duty.
We do. we just caught up with it last night. Funny enough, we watched 2 episodes last night.
Gripping. Every week it almost builds that stress, because you can feel the tension in this, and it's great, and you think, oh, wasn't quite expecting it to go like that. And it's one of those that just twists and turns, but you can totally lose yourself in that gripping thing.
I think that's the point, isn't it? You can lose yourself in another story. So I tend to I'll read, or I might bake. Sometimes cooking and baking is kind of a de-stress. Sometimes going for a walk helps. I'm a naturally lazy person when it comes to exercise, so walking is probably not top of my agenda, but it does come up soon. I mean, just going out and sitting and looking at the sea, because we can. In fact, I bought myself the other day. I bought myself a thermos cup, so that I can make myself a coffee and go down and just find a bench and just sit and drink coffee by the side of the sea.
Oh, lovely.
Well, it's not we're on the top of a cliff, but overlooking the sea. That's kind of my idea of heaven. I like the water. I find the water very soothing. So I think that's kind of what I do. So distract myself from whatever it is that's stressing me out.
But sometimes that's what you need, isn't it? It's that taking you away from the situation or set of situations that are creating that tension in your world that helps you. And I'm sure Andrea will have a lot more tips and, you know, ways that we can manage that.
I'm sure. I'm looking forward to having a chat. Again, Andrea is somebody I've known via the trainer communities that I'm in. We both know her from another Facebook community that we're both in.
Yeah.
And it's going to be fun having a chat with Andrea about all the stuff that she does, and specifically about stress awareness as well. But other than that, this is the second podcast we're recording today, listeners, as you will have heard in last week's episode, because that was the first one we recorded today. So we've kind of exhausted all the topics of what we're going to do for the rest of the day, I think. So I think we'll move swiftly on from that. We'll go and queue up the interview with Andrea. Welcome back, listeners. And now we have with us the lovely Andrea Newton. Welcome, Andrea, to Virtually Amazing, the podcast. Now, am I right that April is Stress Awareness Month?
It is indeed. It's Stress Awareness Month and has been since 1992.
Oh, well, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think this year, to be honest, we need it more than ever. So that's perhaps why this year it's getting a little bit more airspace, if you like.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I just have to own up that we are recording this on the 6th of April. So we're bang in the beginning of the Stress Awareness Month. However, it won't go out till May because we batch record, but it will be relevant whenever it goes out because stress is with us all the time. In fact, in our opening segment, Joe and I were discussing what we do to de-stress when stress shows up, but perhaps you can give our listeners a bit of an introduction to yourself, who you are, what you do, and why this is so important to you.
Yeah, sure. So I've been involved in the corporate world, shall we say, for 26 years now, which is incredible, Shelley, because as you know, I'm only 21 in my head. And I work with organisations to help them create mentally healthy and psychologically safe workplaces, encouraging lots of open, honest, frank dialogue so that people know where they stand, what's expected of them, what good looks like, and really so that conversations can be had so that issues are dealt with, or indeed so that people get the support that they need. So you can probably see already why stress awareness is important to me. And I know, for example, that in certain organisations, stress is seen as a bit of a badge of honour. You know, it's kind of, if you're not stressed, you mustn't be working hard enough, sort of thing. And also some of the managers that I work with who have perhaps been promoted because they were good at their jobs rather than necessarily be good people managers, they can find that quite stressful, as can the poor souls that work for them. So they find they've got a boss who was good at digging holes, but perhaps isn't that great when it comes to people skills. Yeah. So in a nutshell, that's me, and that's why stress matters.
Absolutely. So our audience, as you know, are virtual assistants. Virtually Amazing is a podcast for virtual assistants. Yep. And we also, I mean, I'm a trainer. I'm not a virtual assistant, but I train virtual assistants. Joe is a virtual assistant, a very competent GDPR one you've now morphed into, haven't you, Joe? Yep. But as a business owner, and you must have experienced this yourself running your own business, Andrea, we also have stressful situations. So have you got any coping strategies or top tips or anything that would help?
I think you're absolutely right there, Shelley. It doesn't matter whether you're an employee or whether you're an entrepreneur or whether you're self-employed. The world in which we live is very fast-paced, very future-focused, very results-oriented. And obviously the last 12 months has been a period of great uncertainty for people. So I don't think there's anybody that hasn't in some way been affected by the pandemic. And we know that the figures for stress, anxiety and depression have increased significantly as a result of that. And they reckon that the three factors that have made that big difference is lack of connection, lack of certainty and lack of control. So I think for your listeners as VAs, no doubt they've been on the tail end of all of that stuff, whether personally or professionally. So I think you're right. I don't think it matters the environment. Stress is all around. My biggest advice, my best advice, is prevention is always better than cure. And actually, an ounce of prevention is always far preferable to a pound of cure. So I'm on a bit of a mission to encourage people to think about things that they can do that are more preventative. But also as well to be honest with themselves. I sometimes think that we sometimes kid ourselves. I'm all right, I'm okay, I've just had a busy couple of days, when actually our bodies and our minds are saying we need to rest.
Yeah. I do get that occasionally, and I have been known to decide I'm just not going to walk through that door over there today. This is my spare room, which doubles as my office, or as it was last week, my kids' bedroom. So, but it's back to being my office, thankfully now. But there are days when I feel I just can't go through that door, and because I'm my own boss, unless I'm delivering a live workshop, I actually have the freedom to make that decision. But not everybody is in that kind of privileged position. So how do you cope with that when you know you need a break, but you don't feel you can take a break?
I think if you find yourself in that situation where you perhaps haven't got the luxury of that choice, it's about sort of thinking about what have I got to do, and perhaps doing a little bit of prioritizing. Maybe we don't have to do absolutely everything today. Maybe we could just chunk things in the day. Can we build in a break, even if it's just getting away from your desk at lunchtime, getting out perhaps for half an hour, having a walk in the fresh air? Really thinking about, if I absolutely have to be here, how can I make it more, sort of give myself a little reward for everything that I do achieve.
Yeah.
I have a colleague, and she keeps one of those little mini trampolines under her desk. And whenever she feels that she's getting sort of a little bit stressy, she'll get the trampoline out and literally have 2 minutes, which just completely changes the energy in our bodies and also the chemicals in our brain. So it's just little thing that we build into the day if we haven't got the choice.
That's really interesting you say that about a 2-minute trampoline break, because I'm currently listening to an audiobook called Atomic Habits, which was recommended by some other trainers in another community. And I don't know, have you listened or read it at all, Andrea?
I understand that the main concept of it is choosing little things that we can do consistently and well, and building on top of perhaps existing habits.
Absolutely. But this morning I was out on my walk along the seafront. I'm showing off there when I'm walking along the seafront. I'll own up to it. I was showing off. But so I was walking along listening. I've been listening to the book because it's just easier that way when I'm walking along. And this morning he talked about his 2-minute rule. And his 2-minute rule was to break any task down into a 2-minute segment, because it's about being consistent, showing up and doing things. So that just sparked that connection. He says, like, if your goal is to read more, it's kind of, well, I'll read 1 page, because you can read 1 page in 2 minutes. Eventually you won't just read for 2 minutes, you'll just keep going. But that 2 minutes really, really, and that I think that's a really cool thing. Mini trampoline sounds like fun.
But because that changes not only your kind of energy levels, but it also changes our internal biology, because as I'm sure you know, whenever we have any sort of stress response, our body downloads adrenaline, cortisol and noradrenaline to get us ready for the caveman fight or flight. And if you think about it, if we're not having to literally fight or flee because it isn't a physical stress, where do those chemicals go? And there's a big suggestion that today's stress is actually creating inflammation in the bodies, which leads to both physical and mental health problems. So the bouncing on the trampoline absolutely changes your state of mind, changes your energy, but also gets your system active.
Gets rid of that
little things like that. But it is that 2 minutes, just chunking things down, because I think sometimes stress comes because we feel overwhelmed. So it may well be just sitting back and making a list and prioritizing and, just giving, as you say, 2 minutes to the tasks that we perhaps don't enjoy quite so much. But very much about recognizing that if you're having lots of days like that, you really do need to take a step back and really think about, sort of the overall picture. Because whilst as human beings, we respond well to a little bit of pressure, the right place, in the right way, on the right days. But if that pressure is prolonged,
Oh, we seem to have lost Andrea for a minute.
It becomes overwhelming.
Yeah, we lost you there for a minute,
Oh,
Andrea.
okay.
I think the internet connection went a bit foggy. So you were just talking about if the pressure becomes prolonged.
Yeah, if we sort of dealing with pressure on a, let's say, chronic basis, it's ongoing, it's prolonged for a period of time, that can actually take us from a place of high performance actually into feeling weary, fatigued, even burnout. So, if people are starting to realize that the stressful days are getting more frequent than the not, it really is a kind of a message from the universe to take a step back and really rethink it all.
Yeah. Joe, have you got anything to add or comment or ask Andrea at this point?
I have to say that I totally understand everything. For me, it's a swim. That's what I have found the last 12 months not significantly stressful, but I have missed that coping, not even the coping mechanism, but that for me, the swim with the repetitive, consistent action, going up and down, emptying my head. You then, I don't know whether it's you deal with the stress better or it opens up your mind to thinking creatively about whatever that problem is. But that's been missing, and I can't wait till after the 12th, I have to say.
But again, that's it's a combination of factors there, Joe, because you've obviously got the physical movement. So again, your system, your energy levels are changing. When you're swimming, you can't really answer emails or talk to people on the phone or scroll through social media. So there's a digital detox going on. It's an opportunity, therefore, for your mind to be disconnecting. And often that's when we can be really productive because our mind, kind of incubates ideas and thoughts. So all of those things together. And I guess as well for you, because I know you're a mum, a little bit of quiet time away from the demands of being, 3 things all at once. So all of that combined, that's why your swimming matters so much.
I would totally agree, because it is that me time, because I normally go first thing in the morning while, my husband's still at home. Mind you, I've got teenagers now, so it's not as relevant, but and just emptying my head. And I hadn't even equated it to not being accessible by social media and all of those additional things. But it is that you're not at the end of the phone, the email, the notification going ping ping in your head, because you don't take the phone.
No, even if you wanted to do that, you couldn't, because it isn't practical to do so. You're not going to tuck it down the top of your swimming costume.
Not a good look. Never mind what it would do to your phone.
It's all those things. I think for me, the important thing is that we not a good look, but it's about us all finding our equivalent of what that self-care is. Joe obviously gets a lot from the swimming. Shelley, perhaps yours is the walk along the seafront. I do a daily dog walk because that gets me away from my desk. It gets me in the fresh air. It gets me out in the country, and it gives me that headspace. And we need to really appreciate that self-care doesn't have to be sandals and candles. It can be whatever works. For that person.
Well, I'm, as many of our listeners know, and many people know about it, I am Jewish and I'm Orthodox, which means that we have Shabbat every week. So from sundown on Friday till sundown on Saturday, we don't do anything that equates to work, insofar as that's even turning on a light. So certainly no digital stuff. So every week I have 25 hours completely away from social media, my inbox and everything. And I have to say, I never used to be, growing up, that wasn't the way we were. But I couldn't go back now to being 7 days on. And I think having that structure is really important. And we just had a holiday as well. We just had Passover when we were just after we were recording this, coinciding with Easter. So we had even more detoxing days, which were festival days. And I think that for me, that's really important. But I also swim every morning in the summer. We have a swimming pool in our block of flats, and it's outdoors. We can only really use it in the summer because it's freezing in the winter. And I'm not brave enough. I'm just not brave enough to go out in the freezing cold. So I'm looking forward to when that reopens, although they're threatening that it might not open this summer because they've got to do some work to it. So we'll see. But I do miss, yes, I'm with you, Jo. I'm missing the swimming. Yeah. So, yeah. But that's,
I think as Andrea says, though, it's not everybody's going to swim, not everybody's going to walk. It could be the dog walk. And, some days it could just be a bar of chocolate. And that really works too, doesn't it, to help? I know we should all be talking fitness and health, but sometimes a bar of chocolate or whatever that is just answers that need. But, it's, I suppose the other side of that is, not a bar of chocolate every day.
No, and that's the trouble, you see. That's the problem that we've had with the pandemic and during lockdown, Jo. People have been reaching for different coping mechanisms to make themselves feel better. And as you say, the occasional bar of chocolate, absolutely. But there's also been people who perhaps didn't used to drink during the week. They'd only drink at weekends. But now, why wouldn't you? They've not got to drive anywhere the next day. They're not working. And that's where we sometimes have to think about, if our stress is taking us towards unhealthy coping mechanisms, that in itself can produce another lot of stress. If you suddenly find that you're dependent on whatever that little strategy was. And for me at the moment, I can't go out for at least the next 6 months until I've lost 45 pounds that I've gained as an impact of the corona stones that I'm carrying. So not always helpful, my love, that sugar.
No, definitely not. Definitely not.
Isn't that the never drink your calories phrase, or never eat the additional? It is that what I can't remember what it is now, but it's that kind of thing, isn't it? But we've all done it.
Yeah, we've all done it. But I think also the other side of that is also you get that rush and that momentary feeling of, okay, I'm not stressed anymore. And then you immediately go into feeling stressed because that what you just did was not good for you. Or you get stressed because all of a sudden you realize, yes, I am drinking every night and I'm not just stopping at one glass of wine, I'm having a bottle. And then all of a sudden that's a whole different kind of stress.
Yeah, for sure. And, if you think about, I used to be a smoker. I mean, more than 20 years ago since I've stopped, but I used to see smoking as being my stress release. And actually, if I think about it, what it was is I was getting away from my desk. I was standing in the fresh air. I was chatting to like-minded people, and I was literally taking 10 minutes away from whatever it was. So can I reproduce that same effect without the nicotine?
Yeah.
And again, it's the same for the chocolate or the gin or, whatever our vice may be. But, as long as it doesn't become a dependency, but it's more about finding those healthy coping mechanisms, whatever they might be.
Yeah. I sometimes find just going in the other room and sitting in the chair with a cup of tea and like staring mindlessly into the distance just for 5 minutes can help. Definitely. And that doesn't involve a bar of chocolate. And I just don't have chocolate in the house. I did last week. It's Passover. I have eaten a year's supply of chocolate. There is no more chocolate in the house. In fact, I said to my husband last night, I said, look, there's 2 squares of this particular chocolate, which I like, and he's not that keen on. I said, I'm going to throw it away because if it's in the cupboard, I'll eat it. He said, no, I don't like waste. I'll eat it.
Well, he was doing a service, but
Yeah, there you go. But no, I mean, it's, you know, it's those sorts of things, isn't it? It's about removing that temptation as well, to a certain extent.
I do agree with the cup of tea as well, because sometimes, you know, especially if you've been stressed by something and you're on the screen all day, just that stepping away. And I'm also an ex-smoker as well. And, you know, just stepping away for 10 minutes, having a cup of tea. I mean, generally I'm on my own anyway, but that sort of staring into space, cup of tea, and then you're ready to start again. It can feel invigorating, even if you're only going to walk to the kettle and do that process. So,
and it's that whole you know, everyone's heard of Stephen Covey, but one of the habits that people don't talk about as much is the habit of the taking time out to sharpen the saw. You know, and the story, as I'm sure you know, is the story of the woodcutter who believed that in order to achieve the results that he needed, the volumes of wood, that he didn't have time for a break. He couldn't possibly stop for lunch. And so he, you know, pushed on regardless. And obviously, as he did, the saw becomes more blunt. So it's also something in the law of diminishing returns. You know, the more we push against it, the more hours we do, the more we try to cram in, actually, the less effective, the less productive we become.
Yeah. So what, when we've got our VAs who are working predominantly on their own, but some of them will be in teams, there could be all sorts of stressors, much like in an organization, if you're working with a team of VAs. So just because you're not all in the same building doesn't mean you're not going to have the same sort of team dynamics. So what strategies or advice can you give? You know, obviously along the stitching time saves 9 or the ounce saves a pound, it's the same analogy. But what sort of things do you think people can set up ahead of that to alleviate stress that might occur later?
I always suggest to people to sort of think about their well-being a bit like a bank account, and acknowledge that there's going to be rainy days, but in order to have something to fall back on, we need to have made some deliberate deposits, deliberate investments up front. And I'll always encourage people to look at something simple like the 5 ways to well-being, which talks about 5 of the key things that we could all do that's a deliberate investment in our mental health, because we can't stop the fact that certain things are going to crop up, you know, a dissatisfied customer or an angry client, or even just a traffic jam on the motorway when you're trying to get to a meeting with a client, for example. You know, we can't always control that kind of stuff, but the more we invest in our own emotional resilience, the more we develop those, you know, sort of strategies and habits, actually the better able we are to cope, because the stress isn't what the issue is, it's our perception of it. You know, so sitting in a traffic jam getting all stressed actually doesn't change anything. But if you have been, you know, sort of practicing maybe mindfulness, you've got into the habit of being able to reframe, you've done some personal development, you can deal with situations like that so much better. So it's really about every single one of us, whether we are a VA working at home on our own or whether we're in a team of others, it's about us recognizing the importance of good self-care and acknowledging, one of my favorite sayings is, you can't control the waves, but you can learn to surf.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good one. It's really interesting because I don't know about you, Joe, but I'm finding that sometimes our podcast episodes go in waves, and we seem to talk about similar subjects bunched up together. So the podcast, this is our second podcast recording today. The first one, which would be last week's episode, we were talking to Dinah Tobias, who has launched Blooming Menopause, and we were talking about self-care and being aware before the menopause. So very, very a different kind of stress to the ones that you're describing, but very similar ways of dealing or coping with it. And why is it that as humans we are so inept at taking our own advice?
Well, they do say that we teach what we most need to learn.
Oh dear.
Yeah, indeed. And I actually think it's part of, I think, the world in which we live, where it's about faster, quicker, higher, more. And it's also about what does success mean to you, you know, and really starting with that. And as I'm sure Dinah will probably have mentioned, you know, especially during the menopause, because of the hormonal shift, the biological changes, that can also negatively impact on our mental health.
Yeah.
You know, and can even lead to depression and suicide ideation. So as women particularly, there's also certain hormonal and biological factors that we need to consider when it comes to managing our stress responses. But you're right, you know, so many of us know what we ought to do. But there's a big difference, isn't there, between knowing it and doing it?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. We all know that we ought to eat healthily. We ought to exercise more. We ought to take time out. We ought to do all these things, but we don't actually do it, or we do it for a bit and then we stop and then we start again. So
and the risk is, Shelley, I mean, you know, the work that I do is mainly because of my own lived experience, that I didn't invest in my own self-care. I ignored the feelings of burnout, and I carried on regardless, because clearly as a business owner, self-employed, a gobby northern bird, that was what was expected of me.
Yeah.
And then when the big waves hit, I literally had nothing in the tank. And that's when, you know, I spent that time rooting around at rock bottom and peering over the edge. So I want to use my story to really encourage other women, you know, and I'm guessing your audience is predominantly, though.
Predominantly.
Yeah, but no doubt there will be male members. It's kind of recognizing that often as women, we play lots of different roles. And we still, stereotypically, statistically, we are still the main childcare providers, for example. And so sometimes it's about recognizing that we need to be kind to ourselves.
Yeah.
And I'm not somebody who's known for pink and fluffy. I am indeed known for being a gobby northern bird who drinks a lot of gin, swears and watches rugby. But I do appreciate the importance of that self-care and kindness now, having come through a period of depression, anxiety and suicide ideation. So, you know, I really want my story to be a way of helping other people realise that actually taking time out to sharpen the saw isn't selfish, it's actually critical, especially in today's very busy world, and especially given the 12 months that we've just lived through.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really, really important message. And I've just gone completely blank.
It's a very powerful message and a useful reminder to all of us that self-care is not selfish.
Yeah, no, definitely not selfish. Really critical, as to use your own words, Andrea. So thank you for that. That's been a fascinating delve into stress and some techniques that we can use to help ourselves. Go have a cup of tea somewhere and stare into the distance, go for a walk, have a swim, whatever it is. Just take time out when you start to recognize that you are reaching that critical point where you just can't step through that door today. So it's really, really important. And find somebody who can support you as well. I think that's also critical, isn't it? To find somebody you can talk to about those feelings.
Yeah, but being honest with yourself is the very first step, and making sure that you're not putting your energy into suppressing or ignoring how you're feeling. And actually being bold enough to say, I think I just need a moment. You know, we've all got a limit, we've all got a level. And for me, that self-awareness piece is the first step on that path.
I do resonate with what you're saying, because it's now 2000 and something, 5, 6. When did I start there? 2002 started the business. So it would have been around 2001-ish, 2001. I was actually employed by a fantastic training company, which was a very safe environment. And one day at the end of a training day, I completely went to pieces with the person who managed me, and I kind of got to that point where I recognized I've been sitting on a lot of emotion. It was like 30 years buildup of stuff. I'm not going to bore you with the story. It's not really that glamorous or anything, but it and it's only at the point, I think, when you said you were rootling around at rock bottom, you've got to acknowledge that you have to get help of some sort. Ended up in 6 months of therapy, which was the best thing that what I needed to do at the time. But yeah, you're right. You and then you forget about it. Well, I did. Okay, I've got through that. I'm better now, and I'm on with it. But every so often, you need to remember that, because you need to make sure that you take that step back and take that time out and build that in.
Absolutely, or else all your energy goes into wearing a mask and pretending that you're okay, which again depletes the resilience that you've got available to deal with any tough stuff. And nobody could have predicted a global pandemic or some of the things that we've had to adapt to over the last 12 months. And given that we can't control external environmental factors like that, the only thing we can do is take good care of ourselves so that we're in a good place to be able to, to ride it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's been absolutely fascinating, Andrea. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And we will put on the webpage that goes with the podcast all the details of where people can find you and how they can get in touch with you and all the rest of those bits of information. And just once again, thank you for coming.
You're more than very welcome. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Welcome back, listeners. And we were just having a chat before we started recording this ending segment about how amazing and important Andrea's message is about stress and preventing stress from appearing in the first place. I think that's very, very valid advice. Don't you, Jo?
Yeah, it's something that we can't get away from. And some stress now and again drives us, and it's good for us to be pushed that little bit. But there's a line between being pushed and just, as Andrea said, get into a dark place where you really feel out of control.
Yeah.
And it would be so easy for us all working alone, especially after the 12 months we've all experienced, to just let that go.
Yeah, because, when you work on your own, one of the things that I know you really like doing, which is going and sitting in a coffee shop every so often to work.
Yeah.
And it's about having those people around you. You may not need to interact with them on a one-on-one basis, but it's important to know that sometime in the week you're going to see people. Cool. And also going to physical networking events. I mean, I've been doing networking online, as we all have in this pandemic, and for me that's been great because I can't get to the networks in the UK that I would normally go to. But it's definitely something that when you work, even if you choose to be your own boss and work from home or from an office by yourself, losing access to general people is hard.
And the other thing is that it's, we've all been stuck at home, stuck with the same kids, the same husband or brother or sister. Yeah. And while they're great, there's something about going to a coffee shop and having that conversation that's, oh, lovely, how are you? Great, thanks for the coffee. Oh, by the way, what's in that cake? And you're just having chit chat with somebody who is not part of your family circle. It's not a client, it's not, and you're passing the time of day, and it takes you out of your business. And that 5-minute interaction while you're paying is sometimes enough to just lift you.
Absolutely, especially if the person tells you you're looking good today, or you've got a nice jumper on, or whatever it might be. So definitely. So one of the things that it's actually made me think about that could be stressing people out, and I'm going to do a little plug here, so close your ears if you don't want to listen. But one of the things that could stress you out is being given a piece of work by a client that you don't know how to technically do. So you probably know what you need to do, but you maybe don't have quite all the technical skills to do it, whether that's making a spreadsheet add up or creating a fabulous report in Word or a perfect PowerPoint presentation. And investing some time in learning that stuff before you need to use it could be a great way of relieving the stress around being given a task that you're not up to, or that you don't feel that you're up to. You may well be up to it, but you might think you're not up to it. And often what we think is what we feel. And then there's a whole downward spiral there. So go and have a look at the course directory on Tomorrow's VA and see what is there that can help you alleviate that stress, either as a just-in-time mechanism, because once you buy one of my courses, you have lifetime access to it. You never have to pay me again, and whichever one you've bought, you can just keep going back to. So even if you bought my How to Create eBooks and Lead Magnets for Word course, which has got just about everything you're going to need in your daily working Word life in it, even if you did it today and didn't ever need to use it, and a year down the line somebody said, oh, can you do that for me, and you've forgotten, you can go back and refresh, because it's there forever. So yeah, in all the nearly a year of podcasts, I haven't plugged my stuff very much, so I think I'm allowed. What do you think, Jo? Am I allowed?
I think absolutely. Yeah.
I'm allowed. Go buy my courses. There you go. No, serious, honest. That really is a serious thing, because I know for me, I get stressed if I don't know how to do something and I have to learn something. I've been asked to create an onboarding video for a technical subject that is not in my wheelhouse. And I have to make sure that I don't actually need to know anything, because they've given me everything they want me to say. Not a script, but I'll put the script together, but I know what it needs to do because I've seen what they've already got. It just needs to be a little bit more polished than what they've got. But for me, the fear is that I won't know enough. So I'm doing some reading around the topic so that I understand the broad brush. And at least when I'm doing my voiceover, I can do it with confidence. And that's what I mean about taking the stress out of a technical situation. Knowing how to do something, I think, can alleviate a lot of stress when that client says, I need that presentation by 5 o'clock tomorrow, and then you've got to go and learn it all in order to do it and turn it around. That can be stressful. That's just one thing that sprung to mind in relation to stress. But that's enough of that for today. It's 7 o'clock here in Israel. It's been a really hot day today. It's been the first really, really hot day, which I'm sure you don't want to hear, but it's been uncomfortably hot today. It's been 27, 28 degrees. It's one of those thick, soupy heat days, not a pleasant hot day. So, it's nice when it's hot, but this is kind of like in hot soup. But I think we've finished with the winter now. I think we're headed to the summer. So that's quite nice. So I will make sure to be up and out on my walk early tomorrow. So.
It sounds wonderful. Temperature here, I think maybe we've crawled to 8 degrees.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, I'm back in the fleeces and the thermals.
Yeah, I bet I would be too. Actually, it's quite interesting. I don't know how I would cope with the cold now. I mean, it gets very cold here when it's cold, because as we've talked about it before, we don't have central heating and we don't have carpets. We don't have thick curtains. So we haven't got the padding and the innate heating. And also everything's made of concrete or marble. So it's, ceramic tiles or marble tiles on the floor. So it's built for the weather like we have today. So when it's cold, it actually does feel really cold.
Yep.
So it's going to be interesting how, when I finally get to the UK, and I'm going to be in the UK in June, I'm coming for the PA show, that I'm definitely doing. So that's quite exciting. I'm waiting on the announcement by Boris Johnson next week about when I won't need to quarantine coming into the UK, because that will make a big difference to us. So
he did mention that Israel was, one of the top countries. They referenced that as part of the discussion. So
yeah. So we're hoping that we'll be on the green list, and that because we've been vaccinated, we'll be able to come in and not have to quarantine when we get there. And so we're looking forward to that. So the minute the minute that's announced, we'll be on a plane. Well, maybe not quite the minute, because we may not be able to get a flight, but because there'll be a lot of people thinking exactly the same thing. Who've got
mass exodus.
Yeah, mass exodus, because people have got children and parents and brothers and sisters. But we want to see our son in London and the baby, who is 8 months old now, and we've not met him yet. So we want to go. And I was just talking in the little hiatus we had there. My son called me with my granddaughter, who's 4, and we had a nice chat. She's a bit video shy, so if she actually wanted to talk to me, it was really nice that I was able to talk to her. So we're really looking forward to being able to see them. So we might nip over for a long weekend. And then I'll come back in June for the PA show. So we'll see. But that's something to look forward to.
Enjoy your evening.
Thank you.
We shall catch up.
On
our next recording.
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you, listeners. As ever, Shelley at tomorrowsva.com, Joe at jlbbusinessconsulting.co.uk. Tomorrow's VA is my website. Virtually Amazing has its own Facebook page. Do give us a rating on Apple Podcasts, and we'll see you next week.
You have been listening to Virtually Amazing, the podcast for virtual assistants with Shelley Fishel and Joe Brianti. We will be back with you again next week with yet another amazing episode. See you then.